Circuit Court is now in session. The Honorable Circuit Court Judge C.A. Woodall III presiding. Be seated and come to order.
Thank you, Officer Butts. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Trigg Circuit Court session this morning for Case 15 CR 00029, Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Ann Plotkin. Ms. Plotkin is here with her attorney, Honorable Ken Root. Commonwealth's represented by Honorable Carrie Obie Wiggins and Honorable Jill Giordano. And I believe we have some official business to deal with this morning. Mr. Root, do you have some documents you want to approach and hand off?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please. Thank you. Now, Ms. Plotkin, if you don't mind, if you'll come up here with Mr. Root at this lectern. Let me ask you first of all to raise your right hand. Do they need to switch?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth? All right. Now I'm going to need you to speak up.
Yes.
Thank you. And we'll start with a couple of easy things. Please state your name and your last home address.
Ann Plotkin, it was the Penny Royal Apartments.
And that's Hopkinsville, Kentucky. All right. And what's your date of birth, please?
9/1973.
All right. And so that makes you how old as you're standing here today?
43.
All right. And how far did you go in school?
12th grade.
And so you can read and write, and you could read these plea-related documents. Thank you for reminding me. I need an out-loud answer, please, so we pick it up on the microphone. So you could read these plea-related
Yes.
documents? All right. Have you ever suffered from any mental illness or mental disease or defect that affects your ability to think or to reason?
No.
And do you, excuse me, do you take any medicine for any type of mental situation, depression or anything like that?
No.
All right. Have you talked with Mr. Root about competency to stand trial?
Yes.
All right. And do you believe that you understand the nature and the consequences of this case?
Yes.
And you know we're scheduled for trial to begin in October.
Yes.
And do you think that if the case were to be tried, that you would be able to assist Mr. Root in defending yourself?
Yes.
All right. And do you also believe that you're able to make a rational and a clear decision for yourself in entering a plea today as opposed to going forward with the trial?
Yes.
You're not under the influence of any substance today that affects your ability to think or to reason, are you? All right. Do you believe that you understand what we're doing here this morning? Okay. And again, I'm going to ask you to speak up, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, as you know, you stand here charged by a Trigg County grand jury in count 1 with the capital offense murder by complicity of Boyd Lindsay Champion. Under count 2, another capital offense murder count of complicity with Ryan Champion, Vito Riservato, or others in the death of Joy Champion. And count 3 is similarly worded, capital offense murder by complicity of Emily K. Champion. You understand that those are the charges pending against you? And in talking with Mr. Root, you're also aware that the Commonwealth has filed its notice of intent to seek the death penalty based upon intentional killing and multiple deaths. Do you understand each of those charges?
Yes.
All right. And if at some point the batteries in that hearing assistance device go bad or you can't hear me, you ask me to speak up or we'll get another set of hearing aids, okay? All right. And by the same token, if you should get tired and need to sit down, we can make arrangements for that. And if you have a question about my questions, feel free to talk with Mr. Root. Stand away from the microphone and talk with him for a minute before you answer my question, all right? All right. Do you also understand the facts from which each of those charges arose? You understand why you got charged with those offenses?
Yes,
All right. In other words, you understand why you were charged with complicity to murder on those 3 counts?
yes,
All right. Have you talked with Mr. Root about the possible defenses that you might have if the case did go to trial?
yes,
And do you understand that each of those cases, each of those counts, carries a penalty of a minimum of 10 to 20 years or life without probation or parole for 25 years, or life without probation or parole at all, or the death penalty the way it is right now? You understand those are the consequences?
yes,
Okay.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
you said 10 to 20 years, and each of those carry
10 to 50, thank you.
20
20 to 50, I
I'm sorry.
misspoke. Thank you
Okay.
both for correcting me. 20 to 50 or life or the rest of that. Thank you. Now, a little while ago, or perhaps, let's see, when was it? Yeah, a little while ago, you went over some paperwork, one of which is a motion to enter a guilty plea. And as you went through that, you remember seeing your constitutional rights written down there? I'll remind you that you do have the right to a speedy and public trial by jury, where the Commonwealth would have to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You have the right to confront or to see and to cross-examine any witnesses who are called to testify against you, as well as the right to compel or to make witnesses attend and testify on your behalf. You have the right to not testify against yourself. And if you had a trial and you were convicted, you'd have the right to appeal that conviction to a higher court, and if you couldn't afford a lawyer then, the court would appoint one for you. You understand you have all those rights? And you also understand that by entering a guilty plea today, you waive all of those rights. And that includes the right to not incriminate yourself, because I'm going to ask for your admission here in a minute. You understand that? And you also waive the right to any appeal.
yes,
While this case has been pending, do you think that you've had enough time to talk with your lawyer, Mr. Root, or other lawyers who have been working with him on your case?
yes,
Are you satisfied with the legal services that have been provided to you? Have your lawyers failed to do anything that you've asked them to do as far as investigating your case,
no,
or talking with witnesses, or talking with you?
no,
All right. Do you have any estimate in your mind of how many times or how much time you've spent with your lawyers since you've been arrested for this case and in custody?
Just how many visits and how many times we've been there. She said she had to count. I can tell the court it's been approximately 40 visits, and we've probably spent more than 300 hours between investigators and mediators and attorneys.
All right. And do you have any reason to quarrel with that figure? Do you disagree with those numbers? All right. You hadn't made any effort to keep count yourself, had you? All right. as a, I guess, a sub-question to whether you had enough time to talk with your lawyer, have you had enough time to talk specifically with Mr. Root about entering this guilty plea today?
Yes.
And is it your belief that when I ask Mr. Root, I don't want you to talk for Mr. Root, but that he agrees that this entry of a guilty plea today is in your best interest? Does he agree or disagree with the plea today?
Agree.
All right. Now, on the motion to enter a guilty plea, did you read over and sign that just a little while ago?
Yes.
All right. And then there's a Commonwealth's offer on a plea of guilty. Did you read over and sign it just a little while ago, too? Are you looking at a copy of it?
Yes.
All right. And this is what I'm holding up, and it may be difficult for you to see. But at the top, it's called Commonwealth's offer on a plea of guilty. All right. Did you sign it? And then the final document is a judgment and sentence and waiver of a separate pre-sentence report or separate sentencing hearing. Did you read over and sign it? Did you understand all of those documents before you signed them?
Yes.
Yes. And did you sign them all freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Now, the Commonwealth's offer to you in exchange for a guilty plea on count 1 is 22 years. Count 2 is 22 years, and count 3 is 22 years. All of that time to run concurrently for the total of 22 years. You have to serve at least 85% before becoming eligible for parole by law, because it's a violent offender under the violent offender statute, and you're ineligible for probation or shock probation because it's a capital offense. So 22 years, no probation or shock probation, and no parole eligibility for at least 85% of the time. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
All right. And Mr. Root, is that your understanding too?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Plotkin, other than that offer by the Commonwealth that we've just talked about, has anybody made any statement to you or promise to you about what I might do or what might happen if you entered a guilty plea today? Did anybody speak for me while you were negotiating a plea? And I wasn't involved in the plea negotiation at all, was I? Okay. Has anybody forced you or threatened you to make you enter a guilty plea today? And I think that you told me you understood all 3 of these documents before you signed them. Is that true?
Yes.
Have you ever been convicted of any felony before this? Do you understand from either your own knowledge or talking with Mr. Root that having a felony on your record has a lot of other negative or what are called collateral consequences in your life, separate and apart from the penitentiary time that you're going to have to serve? For example, once you are released, you won't be able to vote, you won't be able to own or possess firearms. There's a list that would take us too long to go through, but you understand there are a lot of other negative things that impact your life about felonies on your record.
Yes.
Okay. They may not be the most important thing, that's why they're called collateral, but you understand there are other things. Okay. Let me ask you, under count 1, if you admit that here in Trigg County, on or between October 21, 2014 and October 26, 2014, did you, in complicity with Ryan Champion and Vito Reservato and with intent to cause the death of another, did you aid, counsel, or attempt to aid Ryan Champion and Vito Reservato in planning or committing the death of Boyd Lindsay Champion, thereby intentionally causing the death of Boyd Lindsay Champion? You each said yes.
Yes.
Under count 2, do you admit that on or between October 21, 2014 and October 26, 2014 here in Trigg County, did you, in complicity with Ryan Champion and Vito Riservato and with the intent to cause the death of another, did you aid, counsel, or attempt to aid Ryan Champion and Vito Riservato in planning or committing the death of Joy A. Champion, thereby intentionally causing the death of Joy A. Champion?
Your Honor, can
You may.
I can hear it going in and out. Can we switch? Because I can hear it also.
We will. Thank you.
It keeps going in and out.
All right.
Did you hear everything you said last? Okay.
All right, under count 2, it reads the same. Can you hear me through those now? It reads the same as count 1, except it's for Joy Champion. And do you admit your guilt to complicity in her murder? And under count 3, do you admit that on or between October 21 of 2014 and October 26 of 2014 in Trigg County, did you, in complicity with Ryan Champion and Vito Riservato and with the intent to cause the death of another, did you aid, counsel, or attempt to aid Ryan Champion and Vito Riservato in planning or committing the death of Emily K. Champion, thereby intentionally causing the death of Emily K. Champion?
Yes.
And do you admit your guilt to those 3 offenses because you are guilty?
Yes.
I'm going to ask Mr. Root some questions. Did you have any questions about what we've been through up to this point? All right. Mr. Root, we spoke just a little bit about the time and effort with Ms. Plotkin. Excuse me, do you think you've had sufficient time to consult with her about this case and about this particular resolution of it?
Yes, sir.
And do you think that she understands what we're doing here today and understands her constitutional rights and understands the collateral consequences of having felonies on her record?
Yes, sir.
Is her plea today consistent with your advice?
Yes, sir.
As far as her state of mind or mental issues, as you've talked with her over those numerous occasions and this couple of years, do you have any doubt in your mind that she's competent to stand trial?
No, Your Honor.
Or that she suffers from any mental illness that might serve as an absolute defense to her finding of guilt if the case were tried?
No, Your Honor.
Do you think that her plea today has been made knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily?
Yes, sir.
And so I take it within that it's your belief that she does have the capacity to appreciate what we're doing here today and to make rational choices about whether going forward with the litigation, the trial, or whether stopping it this way.
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Plotkin, based upon your testimony here today and considering what Mr. Root has told me today, I do believe that your guilty pleas have been made knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily, and so I accept them and find you guilty of those 3 separate counts of complicity to murder. Under the plea agreement, it's clear that you're aware that you're not eligible to be probated here, and so you have separately asked to be sentenced today. And did you talk with Mr. Root about that too?
Yes.
And tell me why you'd just as soon be sentenced today rather than wait for another day
Get it over with.
to get it over with. All right. And if we came back another day, you understand the result wouldn't be any different. You're still going to be ineligible to be released on probation. And with capital offenses, I don't even think that pre-sentence investigation report is necessary, but there will still be now it's going to be post-sentence investigation report that probation officer will probably give you some information about before you leave here today and tell you how to get it back to her. So we'll proceed to sentencing. I know there are some victim impact statements that either in person or in writing. You want to tend to that at this time, Ms. Obie-Wiggins?
Yes, sir. We have two victim impact statements. Judy Williams and Lisa Champion would each like to make an impact statement. So at this time, I would ask the court permission for Lisa Champion to come up and make her statement, and then Judy Williams will follow.
All right. Let me just say, Mr. Root, that you all may be seated during this, and while she's approaching, I do find that the waiver of a separate sentencing hearing has also been made knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. Ms. Champion, just state your name for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Champion.
All right, go ahead. You may proceed.
Prior to October 26, 2014, the Plotkin name was foreign to my family. Currently, it is a name I, as others, associate with the murder of Lindsay, Joy, and Emily. This person considered my family to be worthless, dismissible, of no value to the world. This person was privy to the plans the week prior to October 26, 2014, that culminated in the murders. This person, and I use the term loosely, could have stopped this atrocity. Again, my family was not considered to be of value unless they were dead. Daily I question what my family did to deserve the fate that was delivered to them that day. The fate that this person could have stopped. Instead, the defendant had a twisted allegiance to the evil being that murdered my family. To have an allegiance to him places one on the same level as him. Daily I consider the contributions my family made to the community, to their friends, to their church, and to their professions. My family was always gainfully employed. Lindsay retired in 2012 after 38 years working for the same company that he started with after he graduated from college in 1974. Joy retired in 2009 after 30 years teaching at the same school she started with upon her completion of college in 1976. Emily, embarking upon what was to be a lifetime career as a veterinarian, only allowed in part by the defendant to only practice from 2008 until 2014. Valuable, hard-working people struck down by the complete opposite. My family was robbed of their potential to continue contributing to society in the positive manner they started and ended their lives with. They were robbed by a dark, evil being, assisted by a likewise dark, evil being. These beings, in stark contrast, were not positive contributors or positive influences to the community. There was no lengthy work record, no accolades to their selfless acts of goodness to others. Good overcome by evil, at least temporarily. The shame I feel for my family to now have the Plotkin name associated with the Champion name is piercing. Just as the shame I feel for my family to have taken a small infant into their lives and provided every opportunity to succeed, to turn and then take their lives. My family was a private, unpretentious, unassuming country family that loved life, God, family, and friends. Again, a stark contrast to the beings that smote them from me. Continually I recall the proclaimed allegiance by the defendant on social media for the murderer, insistence of his innocence. How'd that work out for you? Continually I recall even her daughter exclaiming that day, "Glad the B blank 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 is dead." Again, stark contrast between the nature of my deceased family and the dark evilness that proclaimed the need for them to die. Living the daily horror has hardened my soul. No longer a trusting person, folks must prove their trust to me. Perhaps my lack of trust is reasonable considering I found Lindsay and Joy that day in what I thought was Emily. The visions of my family in the manner I found them continually galloped through my mind. Imagine the horror the three faced from the iron of a .45 pistol, brandished by the evil one that the defendant worshipped. The emptiness envelops me as I tarry on the farm that Lindsay and I worked so hard on. The farm that now lacks Lindsay, Joy, and Emily sauntering across. Heartbreaking doesn't even begin to define my torture. I continue to search for them each day, hoping this was just a wretched nightmare. My searching ends when I'm enveloped by the fallout from their deaths. My callous soul wants the defendant to suffer as I have. But I know that's not possible, for the defendant is lacking the components to love family as I have loved. She should have visions of something or someone that was loved, as my family was to me, laying dead at the hands of three evil beings. She should have visions to haunt her. She should feel unfathomable pain and anguish. The defendant should spend her lifetime in prison, never being able to participate in such a plan as she participated in the week prior to October 26, 2014. My callous desire is that she and the evil being should suffer just as Lindsay, Joy, and Emily did. Unfortunately, the laws of the land do not provide for such justice. Instead, we the taxpayers will be providing for her incarceration. Where is the justice in this? The only solace is that she will not have access to planning another mass murder. Judge Woodall, I request you to impose the assigned penalty as agreed. I wish you could assign a sentence of extreme grief for the remainder of her life, a sentence that was imposed on me October 26, 2014. I know the laws of the land do not provide for that, and furthermore, one must be capable of such feelings. Thank you, Judge Woodall, for allowing me to speak on behalf of my family that can no longer speak. Lindsay and Joy, a church picture. They were returning from church that day when they were murdered. Emily Champion, a horse veterinarian, 31 years old. The last time Lindsay, Joy, and I got together to eat at Cracker Barrel. This is what you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Champion. Good morning, Ms. Williams.
Good morning.
If you would, state your name for the
Judy
record.
Williams.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, here we are, at the end of one part of a nightmare that began on October 26, 2014. Justice. Justice is defined as fairness in protection of rights and punishment of wrongs. Since no one was able to protect Joy, Lindsay, and Emily, their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, on October 26, 2014. We are here today to see your punishment of wrongs. Your punishment will never be severe enough for the part you played in their deaths. The scales of justice will never be balanced because they will still be gone. No amount of punishment to those responsible will bring them back. And that is the only thing that would balance the scales of justice. It has taken me these 2 years, 6 months, and 23 days to realize even your and Ryan's death would not balance the scales. I hope while in prison, every time you hear a door slam and lock behind you, you remember why you're there, and that you're there because you didn't make that one phone call that could have prevented and changed everything. I hope you will be punished daily knowing you are responsible for the deaths of 3 beautiful people. And if that fact doesn't bother you, I believe the fact that you're in prison away from your family, unable to be involved in the day-to-day activities of their lives, no longer able to celebrate birthdays, holidays, and special occasions with them will punish you every day. Joy, Lindsay, and Emily are unable to celebrate birthdays, holidays, and special occasions with us. We love and miss them more than words can say, and we think of them every day. You sentenced Joy, Lindsay, and Emily to death, and you sentenced us, the family, to life. Life without them. Our world is not as bright since they've been gone. Now their birthdays are filled with tears and memories. The same is true for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Joy loved my grandchildren like they were her own, and they loved her just as much in return. Since October 26, 2014, Brent has graduated from high school, and Alyssa just this week graduated from 8th grade. Joy missed these 2 special occasions because of you. She would have been so proud of them. You could have prevented their murders from happening. You helped plan the murders. You helped get the items you 3 deemed necessary to carry out this evil deed. You were the go-between. Those cryptic messages between the 3 of you, how smart you must have felt. You were not at Joy and Lindsay's home that beautiful Sunday morning, but you're just as guilty. You could have stopped it. You could have prevented their deaths with 1 phone call to the police. We wouldn't be here today. But you didn't. And that choice, that decision you willingly made, makes you guilty of murdering my sister, brother-in-law, and niece. Our lives were forever changed that sunny Sunday morning. Joy, Lindsay, Gary, and I had planned on going to our cousin's birthday celebration at 2 o'clock that afternoon. And later, Joy, Lindsay, and Emily were to have supper with Lisa, as Emily was planning on leaving the next day to start her new job. She was so excited. She had studied and worked hard to make her dream come true, but she would never leave the home she grew up in. She would never care for another gray filly at the racetrack. She would never run another marathon. She would never give Skylar hugs and kisses. You helped steal those things from her. My beautiful, loving sister. She had worked hard all her life. She had loved her job teaching and was now enjoying retirement. She had marked a few things off her bucket list. She had spent a week at a horse ranch in Wyoming with a dear friend and fellow teacher. And she'd gone ziplining with friends, something she said she would love to do again. There was one thing she didn't get to do, and that was go to the Kentucky Derby. She always dreamed of going on her birthday. This year, the Derby fell on her birthday. And I believe on May 6th, she would have been at that Kentucky Derby. Lindsay also worked hard all his life. After retirement, he had had some health problems that kept him from doing some of the things he enjoyed. But he was getting better and looking forward to riding his motorcycle again. If you had made that phone call, you would have prevented their murders. You are as guilty as the evil that pulled the trigger. 3 beautiful lives gone, and you and Ryan left. There's no justice in that. Joy, Lindsay, and Emily did more good in 1 day of their lives than you've done in your entire life. They touched more lives, made more memories, and loved more deeply during their time on this earth than you could do in 3 lifetimes. They didn't deserve to die, and you don't deserve to live. A life behind bars is not really living. It's just existing on a day-to-day basis. Did you ever think about them and their lives? I would guess not. You never gave them a second thought. You only thought of what you would gain at their death. You joined an evil group, and you will reap what you sowed. Joy, Lindsay, and Emily are no longer on this physical earth. They can't celebrate birthdays, holidays, and special occasions with us, but one thing they did do was prepare for the event we all have to face. They were prepared for their death. They had a personal relationship with God and His Son, Jesus Christ. We know where their soul is upon their death. They're with their Father in heaven. They weren't perfect, but they led good, honest, hard-working Christian lives. They led humble lives and enjoyed helping others. You too will have to face God's final judgment. His judgment will be for eternity, and He will definitely balance the scales of justice. So many lives changed in an instant. Murder, devastation, anger, grief, and you could have prevented it all with one phone call. Whenever Lisa and Laura and I have been faced with a decision we've had to make, we've asked ourselves, what would Joy and Lindsay want? Every decision we've made, Joy and Lindsay have been foremost in our thoughts. Joy and I often talked about how life goes on after a tragedy, and it does. We go on with our lives, and we deal with our anger, depression, and grief the best way we can. We go on with our lives because that's what they would want us to do.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Ms. Obie Wiggins, do you wish to say anything before I pronounce sentence?
Your Honor, at this time, we would just ask you to pronounce sentence as agreed upon on the defendant.
All right. Mr. Root, would you and Ms. Plotkin please approach the lectern again? Anything you wish to say, Mr. Root, before I pronounce sentence as agreed upon?
No, Your Honor, we just request that you follow the recommendation and agreement of the parties.
Ms. Plotkin, anything else you wish to say this morning? No. All right. Then I do find that your waiver has been voluntary, waiver of a separate sentencing hearing. Find that imprisonment is necessary for the protection of the public. You are ineligible for probation, and so I will pronounce sentence as pursuant to the plea agreement on count 1, complicity in the murder of Boyd Lindsay Champion, 22 years. On count 2, complicity in the murder of Joy A. Champion, 22 years. And under count 3, complicity in the murder of Emily K. Champion, 22 years. That time on each count runs concurrently or together for a total of the 22 years. You will receive credit by the Department of Corrections for the time that you've been in custody. And so I do remand you to the custody of the Department of Corrections at this time, Ms. Plotkin. Thank you, Mr. Root. Thank you, Ms. Plotkin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Obie Wiggins. Mr. Giordano. And so that does conclude our proceedings this morning, and so court is adjourned. Thank you all.